to New York and gave Walter White what he had been waiting for. In June 1950, the NAACP announced a bold new initiative, an all-out attack on school segregation. They were going after Plessy itself. Some of our people were afraid it would backfire, but folks were beginning to stand up. In Topeka, Kansas, a welder named Oliver Brown tried to enroll his daughter Linda in a white school in his neighborhood. He was turned away. We took the case. In Prince Edward County, Virginia, Barbara Johns, a junior at rundown Moulton High School, led the entire student body out on strike.
Carrie, you go first. Tell them what we saw at the white kids' school. And I'll tell everybody we want them out on strike and to stay out until we get some action. Okay.
Barbara, I know what you got in mind.
Miss Richardson.
Please, this will only bring trouble.
Miss Richardson, we know what we're doing. Our teachers have tried, our parents have tried, and if we don't do something, nothing will ever change.
But you can't just...
I'm sorry, Miss Richardson. This is what we're doing, and we don't have much time.
Barbara wrote to my office in Richmond for help. Those students became our plaintiffs in Virginia. With all of this activity, Thurgood happily called in more help.
Well, Bill Coleman, very good. Come on in. How you doing? Meet Jack Greenberg. He just joined us.
That's nice, Jack.
Robert Carter.
Mr. Carter.
So I think of you in Philly, Bill.
Oh, man, I moved up to New York. Couldn't get anybody in Philly to hire me.
I know how that goes.
Harvard Law Review. Well, former law clerk to Felix Frankfurter, isn't it?
You can't be that, Mr. Coleman.
I mean, you a darky, ain't you, sir?
We sure as hell could use you. No one knows the Supreme Court like this man, inside or out. No. What was your problem in Topeka, Jack?
Get a group of Negro teachers that say if we win, they'll lose their jobs.
Well, they could be right.
So, some of our plaintiffs are talking about backing out.
What?
But we can't lose Topeka.
Well, that's for sure. If you are trying for a Supreme Court decision that applies to all the segregating states, you're going to have to go in with 3 or 4 good cases.
Jack, I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to find some way to convince them.
We talk about it.
Did you read the South Carolina brief?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. And it is, well, it's weak.
How?
It is if you're going for the Supreme Court. Look, we already know that segregation is wrong. But the question is, how is it unlawful? You see, I don't see the basic legal argument here.
It's straight line 14th Amendment. Segregation is discrimination. Discrimination is unequal treatment, thereby damaging the Negro student.
So, you're going to have to prove that discrimination has damaged your client in a way that violates the 14th Amendment.
Well, we can prove damages, all right?
How are you going to do that?
Using social science evidence.
Man, are you serious?
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of new studies out now, and we can have experts testify.
Experts? Come on, man. I could see experts testifying in tangible matters. I'm talking about equal facilities and pay scales. And
Come on, Bob. Who do you have in mind? Kenneth Clark. Dr. Kenneth Clark. So, with these psychological tests, Dr. Clark, you can, please. Okay. You show that discrimination hurts the Negro children by by causing a feeling of inferiority, which impairs their ability to learn.
Oh, absolutely.
And these feelings grow into self-hatred and ultimately into despair.
No question. It starts at an early age, 4 or 5. And of course, the earlier it starts, the more permanently damaging it is.
Dr. Clark has been testing children for 12 years. Well, what do you think, Bill?
Gentlemen, with all due respect to the good doctor, you will be laughed out of court. Dr. Clark, you use these little dolls, don't you, in your experiment?
Mr. Coleman, my findings are consistent with and supported by a large body of research. Whatever your opinion of my methods, most experts would find merit in them.
Gentlemen, if you are going to succeed at the Supreme Court, you are going to need Mr. Justice Frankfurter on your side. Now, that is a fact. Felix Frankfurter will not buy anything that is not grounded in precedent. And if there's one thing that raises his hackles, it's the suspicion that some lawyer is running a carnival sideshow. I'm sorry, but this social science voodoo is not science, and it sure as hell isn't law.
This is not voodoo. This is about damage, real damage to real children. Thurgood, please.
Bill, you ever read the Negro Press? The Pittsburgh Courier. You ever see Dr. Fred Palmer's ad? Be lighter. Be lovelier. Be loved. Dr. Fred Palmer's new double strength skin whitener. Yes, sir. Does that say damage to you? Thank you.
Now, I knew your father, Mr. Marshall.
Oh, yeah? You don't look that old to me.
Oh, yes, sir. He taught me all the tricks. Well, you know, you worked this job for a while, didn't you?
That's right, a couple of summers. Yeah, I remember my first day. White man that hired me gave me a pair of pants, came halfway up my shin. I complained to the head steward, and he said, "Boy, they can get a man to fit those pants a lot easier than they get some pants to fit you. You just gonna have to try and scrunch down in a little bit more."
Well, that means you're almost a railroad man. And, sir, I want you to know we do appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you, I appreciate that. What's this?
Compliments of all the stewards. We heard you were coming.
Well, all right.
Very nice.
Yes. I'd love to wait for it, but you know, to the railroad man.
One sugar, please. Are we still in Virginia?
No, sir. We just crossed into North Carolina.
Way, way below the Mason-Dixon line. Yeah, Smith and Wesson line. Hey, Doc, you look like you've never been way down south before.
Only once. I tested some children in a couple of cities in Arkansas.
Say that again?
Well, most of my testing has been done in northern cities.
You mean you never tested rural black children in the South?
No, I haven't. Well, I thought you knew.
Dr. Kent's test results are very consistent. There's no reason to believe these children down in Clarendon County are going to test any differently. There are lots of reasons. These are farm kids. The Negroes in Clarendon County are in the majority, 6-1. In 4 days, we go into court in Charleston. Maybe without a case.
That'd be fine right over there. Cost me 50 cents a piece at the 5 and Diamond Hall.
Hey, I'll be the lookout.
Oh, Dr. Clark.
Hello there. What's your name? Ginny. That's a nice name. I'm Dr. Clark. Do you like dolls, Ginny? Do you have any dolls? No dolls at all?
Once I have him chill out.
some dolls here. Want to see? Come on. I'll show you. Do you want to play a game, dolls? Okay. I'm going to ask you some questions, and you tell me the answers. You ready? Okay. Well, which one is the boy doll? And which one is the girl doll? Good. And which one is the colored doll? And Jenny, I want you to hand me the doll that you'd like to play with.
This one.
Now, give me the nice doll.
This one.
Give me the doll that looks bad. All right. Now give me the doll that looks most like you.
Like me?
This one looks most like you. Give me the doll that you would rather play with, Eloise. Fine. Now give me the doll that looks bad to you. Well, yes, there's one that you don't like as well because of the way it looks. Do you think looks most like you? Just show me a doll that looks like you.
I don't want to.
Why?
I want to go home.
It's her and Eloise. Test is over anyway.
May 1951 was our first real test in court. Negroes stood in line and packed the court in Charleston to hear what we had come up with to fight segregation. As risky as Thurgood knew it was, our strategy in each case would rest heavily upon the testimony of social science experts.
If it pleases the court, before we begin these proceedings, I want to make a statement. Now, we concede that the educational facilities for the colored children in Clarendon County are not equal to those of the white children.
May it please the court, this is just an attempt to sidestep the issue.
Your Honors, the legislature has just passed Governor Burns' bill to finance the equalization of schools. All we ask is just a reasonable time to achieve those goals.
Your Honors, that has no bearing on this trial. Now, we contend that these schools are not merely physically unequal. We will show that segregation, in and of itself, is a form of inequality. Order in the courtroom! Your Honors, this state-sanctioned, state-mandated discrimination wounds and cripples innocent children. It denies those segregated the equal protection of the law, which under the 14th Amendment is the birthright of
all American citizens.
Clear this courtroom. Okay, Mr. Marshall. We'll hear what you have to say.
Segregation destroys a Negro child's self-esteem. Because he is constantly reminded that he is an inferior human being, he may come to despise himself and hate the whites.
Now, Dr. Clark, have you...
Excuse me. Segregation also affects a child who belongs to the discriminating group, the white child.
How is the white child affected?
Well, the same people who are teaching him democracy, brotherhood, to love his fellow man are also teaching him to segregate. There's a lot of confusion, naturally, and feelings of guilt.
Dr. Clark, having tested the Negro students involved in this case, what are your conclusions about them?
These 6- and 7-year-old children suffer to a most appalling degree from self-hatred. And this has a paralyzing effect on the growth of their personalities.
This type of injury, in your opinion, is it likely to endure?
In my opinion, this type of wound stays raw for a lifetime.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Dr. Clark, let's see. Now, you talked to how many children last week?
I tested 26.
26 you talked to. And how many students are there in the schools of Clarendon County?
I don't know.
Your Honors, there are 61 Negro schools in the county with a total enrollment of over 6,000 pupils. Now, Dr. Clark, do you think 26 is a fair sampling?
Yes, I believe it was.
And these 26 students' responses forced you to the conclusion that they were being irreparably damaged by attending segregated schools in Clarendon County?
Because they are segregated, they see themselves as being generally inferior. Negro children, unlike white children, expect to be rejected.
Your Honors, I have never ever heard testimony like this in a court of law. I'm sorry, but I don't know what else to ask this gentleman. Thank you.
Whoever doing any of your efforts here will be rewarded.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Clark. Thank you. And Mr. Carter, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you. We thank you all.
Yeah, well, we're a long way from home. It'll probably be several months before we even get a decision from here.
Are we gonna win, Mr. Marshall?
Well, someday, how you doing? Glad y'all came down. Probably not here now, Harry. We want...
Meanwhile, Carter and Greenberg would handle the Brown case in Topeka, but they wouldn't have Ken Clark.
That'll help us get...
And some other key experts were also proving hard to get.
Hey, how... We don't have Dr. Manager?
He says he's on our side, but he also says that he doesn't want to come unless he's subpoenaed. It's too close to home.
What about the big guy in Minnesota?
Rose. He just changed his mind.
Look, Jack, they weren't ready for us in South Carolina, but sooner or later they're going to come after us. Now, who do we have?
Dr. Louisa Holt. Rose recommended her.
Uh-huh.
Bob, she's the best we can do. Dr. Holt. Dr. Louisa Holt. Bob Carter.
Pleasure to meet you, Doctor.
I know I'm here by default. There's so many other social scientists better qualified than I.
Well, we're lucky to have you, Doctor. This way, please. Pardon me, ma'am.
Give the court your name, please.
Oliver Brown.
Are you a resident of Topeka, Kansas, Mr. Brown?
Yes, sir. 511 First Street.
Mr. Brown, do you have a child enrolled in the public schools of Topeka?
I do. She goes to Monroe School, about a mile away.
That's a Negro school?
Yes, sir.
How does Linda get to school, Mr. Brown?
She walks across the Rock Island Railroad switching yard. I worry because it's dangerous. She's only 7 years old.
All right. Is there a school for children Linda's age in the neighborhood, Mr. Brown?
Yes, a white school, Sumner School.
And did you take Linda one day to seek admission at the Sumner School?
I did.
And what happened, Mr. Brown?
They threw us out.
Now, Mrs. Holt, you say that the mere fact that Negro students attend separate schools makes them inferior.
That's not what I said. I said...
Well, you contend that it affects the learning process.
I certainly do.
Well, now, that could rationalize the lower test scores of Negro students, couldn't it, Mrs. Holt?
It doesn't rationalize a thing. How do you know who you are? You get an image of yourself by how other people react to you, what they say about you. If day after day you face nothing but negative responses, you have to begin to internalize them. You feel inferior.
I see. Now, Mrs. Holt, you are aware that here in Topeka, the students are in fact integrated at the junior high level?
Yes, of course.
And I suppose you're going to tell me that that doesn't correct your problem?
It's not my problem, Mr. Goodell. But absolutely, that does not correct it. The earlier such a deep wound is inflicted, the less likely it is ever to heal. But the real problem is...
Your Honor.
No, I'll let her finish.
What is most destructive about school segregation at any level is that it's legal.
Its legality makes it more destructive?
Our government is approving, giving legal sanction to a policy that has to be seen by white people and Negroes as proof that Negroes are inferior.
Well, I must admit, she was a tiger.
See, the Judge Huxman listened to her. Goodell could lay a glove on her.
Well, all I can think now is the bad guys must be saving their best shots for Virginia.
Bob Carter was right. The attorney for Virginia, T. Justin Moore, had scouted the earlier trials, and he was out to whip and humiliate us if he possibly could.
Dr. Shine, you have testified that in a survey of psychologists, a majority agreed that enforced segregation makes Negroes feel inferior. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Moore. 90%.
Dr. Shine, let me ask you, just how do you spell your last name?
Chein.
What kind of name is that?
Oh, are you asking, am I Jewish? Yeah, I am.
All right. Let's take the Jews. They have been discriminated against, have they not?
Yes.
Is your view then that Jews also feel inferior as to status?
Oh, yes, sir.
You really believe that?
Now, I not only believe it, but I have evidence to that effect. Yeah, as a matter of fact, in the social science literature, the very notion of self-hate first appeared in connection with the study of Jews.
Tell me, Dr. Clark, why can't the Negro have great pride of race? Why does he want, I suggest, to be a suntanned white man?
Objection!
Excuse me, Your Honor. I would like to answer that.
Go ahead.
What the Negro wants is to be treated like a human being. The Negro, Mr. Moore, will take pride in being a Negro when his own government stops humiliating him.
Dr. Clark, these 16 Prince Edward students you interviewed, they give you the answers you were looking for?
What are you asking me?
Excuse me, Mr. Moore. Dr. Clark, did you select or coach any of the children?
No, Your Honor.
Can you seriously ask this court to believe that your interviews prove anything at all? Except that kids, all kids, whatever their color, like to complain about their school. How can you dignify this farce by describing it as evidence?
Objection!
Oh, I'll withdraw that question. But, Your Honors, we're not going to allow this so-called expert testimony to go into the record unchallenged. We'll call our own witness who will prove conclusively that there is no sound scientific basis for it. Dr. Garrett, You are president, are you not, of the American Psychological Association?
I am.
And you are head of the Department of Psychology at Columbia University?
I am.
Very well then, Dr. Garrett. Have you known any of the plaintiff's witnesses previously?
I have. Several have been my students, including Dr. Clark.
Then, Dr. Garrett, as a world-recognized authority in social psychology, and as Dr. Clark's mentor, do you see his test results presented here as proof that segregation stunts a student's emotional growth?
Pains me to have to say this. I find no such proof.
Dr. Garrett, can a Negro get a satisfactory education in segregated schools?
Yes. In fact, it seems to me today in Virginia, given the customs of its people, that Negroes will get a better education in separate schools, given equal facilities.
Now, Dr. Garrett, segregated education has been represented here as something alien in our democracy. Do you see it in that light?
The principles of separation education are well established in America. Boys and girls are taught in separate schools. Catholic children attend parochial schools. Jewish children go to Hebrew schools. No stigma attaches.
Thank you, Dr. Garrett.
Dr. Garrett, do you know of any situation involving segregation of Negroes where the stigma of inferiority has not attached?
I don't think any such stigma need attach. I think if the Negroes had equal facilities in the high schools of Virginia, the Negroes would develop their schools up to the level where they would not want to mix. They would develop their sense of dramatic art and music, which they seem to have talent for, and athletics. And they would say, we prefer to remain as a Negro group. I would like to see that happen. I think it would be poetic justice.
Let me ask you directly, Dr. Garrett. Do you believe that Negroes are inherently inferior to whites?
Oh, I'll object to that.
No, I'll allow it.
Well, I can't. No, of course not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
1 week after the Virginia trial was done, decisions from all the lower court cases were in. No surprise in South Carolina. We lost in Virginia, too.
This court finds that racial separation in Virginia rests neither upon prejudice nor caprice, but for generations has been part of the customs of her people. We have looked...
But from the judge in Topeka, Kansas, came some hopeful words.
Segregation of white and colored children in the public schools is detrimental to the colored children. The impact is greater when it has the sanction of law. However, in the recent Sweatt case, the Supreme Court made it clear that it was confining its rulings to graduate schools only.
Plessy has not been overruled and is still the authority permitting a segregated school system in the lower grades. Therefore, the plaintiff's prayer for relief is denied.
So he's saying, but for Plessy, he would have ruled in our favor.
He's saying he can't reverse Plessy.
But the Supreme Court can.
Well, we'll just have to see if those 9 distinguished white men want to talk about it.
We now had 3 cases we hoped would be accepted by the Supreme Court. And a few months later, the court met to consider them.
I feel strongly that we should not hear these cases now.
Felix, we've avoided confronting these issues far, far too long.
I agree. I think it's time we do our job. Our job? I'm not convinced that this is a matter for disposition by the courts.
Well said.
It's going to be very difficult to thrash this out, Felix, but it's necessary. And as Bill says, it's time we faced up to it.
May I have a show of hands? We seem to have the necessary 4 votes. All right. The cases will be consolidated and put on the fall docket. And following tradition, we will refer to them collectively as Briggs versus Egg.
Chief, that's alphabetically, yes, but in this matter, in order to emphasize the geographical variety, might I suggest that instead of South Carolina, the Kansas case be given pride of place?
Oh, Felix, you're splitting hairs.
I'm trying to take the pressure off the South, Bill.
Excellent suggestion, Felix.
Thank you, sir.
Any objections? All right, then. Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka.
When it was announced that the court would hear cases involving school desegregation, opposition was immediate.
You want your children sitting next to some filthy, nappy-headed, big-lipped, sex-crazed nigger, Halen? Hell no! What we say to the damn Supreme Court, you just try and put one goddamn nigger into our schools, and we'll kill the nigger and burn down the school.
But maybe the worst news was that the great John W. Davis, a man who had won 140 cases in the High Court, who literally wrote the book on how to win there, he would oppose Thurgood in the oral arguments.
You don't smoke enough all day, now you gotta stay up and smoke all night too?
You know who this man is?
I remember. You used to cut class to go and hear him argue at the Supreme Court.
And Charlie Houston used to tell us, you got to be twice as good as the white lawyers. Twice as good. Hell, a lawyer never lived who was twice as good as John W. Davis. You go on ahead to bed. I'll be alone. I gotta find something.
Thurgood. Charlie chose you. I chose you. I think we were both right. You'll be ready for it.
Yeah. Is that really your sex? Oh my. I see. All right. Thank you, Jimmy. I'm sorry I took so long. I hope this isn't cold.
Handsome man.
Best in business. But I wish we didn't have to go ahead with this case at all. That was the governor of South Carolina.
I can imagine dear Jimmy Burns getting upset. This is a threat to Dixie as we know and love it.
Well, you don't understand, dear. Jimmy is going to have to make an announcement today that he'll close the schools rather than desegregate.
After he spent all that money improving the colored schools in South Carolina?
That's the whole point, dearest. This whole thing could very well backfire on the Negroes. They could kill the public school system in the South. And it could be a violent and bloody death.
What can you do?
I don't know. The court is so deeply split. There's no leadership. And if Douglas and Hugo Black get their wish, well, disaster to me.
And the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States, oyez, 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 all persons having business before the Honorable the Supreme Court of the United States are admonished to draw near and give their attention, for the court is now sitting. God save the United States and this honorable court.
Your Honors, state laws which require racially segregated schools deny Negroes equal protection of the law. Now, the lower courts in South Carolina, Kansas, and Virginia all cited one Supreme Court decision, Plessy versus Ferguson, which we contend turned its back on the 14th Amendment. The Plessy Doctrine relegated Negroes to second-class citizenship and has been used ever since to keep Negroes down. We believe that Plessy should be overturned. Now, this court has itself recently contradicted Plessy. In Sweat versus Painter, you found unanimously that what the University of Texas had denied Mr. Sweat extended far beyond equal facilities. You said unanimously there is more to equal education than the same books and similarly qualified teachers. You recognize unanimously certain intangibles in law schools like reputation, standing in the community, even the opportunity to exchange views and ideas with other students.
Mr. Marshall, any lawyer, certainly any justice, knows from experience the importance of those factors in a graduate school of law. But I think we've been through this before. What do they have to do with children in public schools?
Your Honor, we argue that Negro children are especially handicapped by laws which set them apart. And you've seen in the records from the lower courts abundant expert testimony from eminent social scientists confirming the psychological damage caused by segregation. Schooling, which should enrich the lives of Negro children, open doors for them to participate fully in our society, instead demeans them and cripples them.
Mr. Marshall, I don't care how much social science testimony you have. You're asking this court to take away from 21 states the right to determine their own social policy.
Mr. Justice Jackson, we're just following the court's own logic about what constitutes equal protection in the Sweat case and applying the same principle to children.
Now, Mr. Marshall, surely you have to consider where these segregation laws came from. Weren't they passed for the purpose of avoiding racial friction?
Well, Mr. Justice Reed, I'm sure that the people who wrote those laws would have said that.
They were thinking of maintaining law and order.
Mr. Justice Reed, my point is that in this century to date, no Negro has served in the legislature of any of these segregating states.
But behind the school segregation laws, there are certain facts of life, certain customs, especially where there are large numbers of Negroes. Don't you think it helps us to realize that?
Your Honor, I can't say it helps us. But these school segregation laws reflect attitudes of the past. We're growing up in America. We're beginning to understand and accept each other better. We just fought a war. together to end fascist racism abroad, we believe that the time has come to end racism at home. I reserve the rest of my time for rebuttal.
Thank you, Counselor.
Now, counsel for the appellants has cited testimony from what he chooses to call expert witnesses, such as Dr. Kenneth Clark, for example, who tested 26 colored students in Clarendon County, South Carolina, with white and brown dolls. Now, Dr. Clark concludes that colored children have been irreparably harmed, made to feel inferior. Well, this is distressing news indeed. Your Honors, I am reminded of the wistful lament in Scriptures, "Oh, that mine enemy had written a book." Well, in fact, Dr. Clark has written on this subject and has described a similar testing of colored students in the integrated schools of a northern city. Now, Dr. Clark concludes that 52% of the colored students thought that the white doll was nicer than the colored doll. In the North, 68% thought so. In the South, 49% of the Negro children thought that the colored doll was bad. In the North, 71% thought so. Now, what has become of the crippling influence of segregation? It has vanished. Now, Your Honors, how can we say with certainty that racially segregated education offends the 14th Amendment? Now, Congress framed the 14th Amendment in June of 1866, and the very next month, July of 1866, that very same Congress voted to establish segregated schools in the District of Columbia. And from that good day to this, the Congress has never wavered from this policy.
Mr. Davis, 1866 was a long time ago. Conditions change. Isn't it possible that what may have seemed all right, that is constitutional in 1866, might now be considered unconstitutional?
Your Honor, changed conditions certainly may affect the laws as set by Congress and by Congress alone. But changed conditions should not extend the intended reach of the Constitution. As we all understand, it is the responsibility of the court to interpret the laws, not to make them. I respectfully submit that no reason is given here for this court to reverse the findings of 80 years. Thank you.
Your Honors, for all his eloquence, Mr. Davis has left untouched my chief point. For some reason, the Negro is segregated against his will, is forced into a state of imposed degradation. For some reason, the Negro child is kept out of the mainstream of American life. For some reason, these acts are all condoned by courts, which are supposed to respect and protect his rights as a full citizen.
You're still asking for a change in social policy, Mr. Marshall. Why isn't this a matter for the Congress?
Mr. Justice Jackson, we don't believe it is up to Congress to interpret amendments to the Constitution, amendments that were clearly passed to guarantee full equality before the law for all citizens. The 14th Amendment was specifically passed to guarantee that there would be no subclass of American citizenship. And we don't believe that Congress can vote on that.
You were just saying that under the Constitution, the individual rights of minorities can never be relegated to the mercies of the majority.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So if I or my child is being deprived of our rights, that isn't a legislative problem. That, we contend, is this court's problem. What we are asking, Your Honors, is that state-imposed segregation be removed and the local school boards be ordered to work out their solutions to reassign children on any reasonable basis. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Marshall. You brought up the question of remedy. If we reverse Plessy, aren't you saying that would automatically entitle every Negro mother to have her child go to a non-segregated school?
Automatically? Wait, not immediately, I don't think.
Well, what would happen? Would you mind spelling this out?
The school boards would have to find some method to distribute children by drawing district lines, I assume.
You assume? Then we would have gerrymandering of the school districts to avoid compliance. Mr. Marshall, nothing would be more foolish for this court than to have it issue an abstract declaration that segregation is bad, only to have it evaded by tricks.
I agree, sir. Completely. But we have to believe the local officials will obey the law.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, sir.
No, there's part 3. But,